And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Ryan Metzler.
Hey everybody, it's Ryan Metzler here again, and today we're going to take a look at a sports game. There's not a lot of those out there that I play, and I am actually a pretty big fan of one called Dreadball. This one is along the same lines with a different rule set. It's called Dreadball, and this is the kickoff portion of Dreadball, which is basically the starter set. It will come with 2 teams, the board, and all of the stuff you'll need to learn to play. Real quick, we're going to take a look at what comes inside of this base set. We'll see how that game plays and how it compares to some of the other sports games out there, and then we'll come back here and we'll get my final opinions of it at the end. So here you can see the components for Dreadball Kickoff. Now, Kickoff is the basic set, or the starter set, of the Dreadball world. And of course, there are additional teams that you can buy in order to add to your collection and play the game. Much like the original game that's kind of like this Blood Bowl you may have seen from Games Workshop, that they still have copies of but don't really produce or support anymore. So I think this is kind of a replacement idea for Blood Bowl, although it does not play identically. So stay tuned to see how the game plays. Now, of course, each player is going to have their own team, and the team members are going to look something like this. Now, this is a orc, of course. You can see he's put together, but my other figures aren't because, well, I'm just not big on assembling figures or painting them, so some of my figures don't have arms or legs. We play with them like this, and it works just fine, but if you're big into painting and assembling minis, you're probably going to want to put them together. I just haven't gotten to it because I don't have the time or the energy to put them together. I'm lazy like that, what can I say? Now, each player is going to have 6 of their players on the field, so we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 3 orcs and 3 goblins on this side, and then we have the Tech 29ers here on the other side. These are kind of a human-like team. Our goblin/orc team only has 2 types of guys. They have guards, which are these guys up front, which aren't allowed to carry the ball at all. They cannot touch the ball. If they touch the ball, they drop it, and they simply just can't have it. And they have jacks, which are our goblins in the background. Jacks are a little bit more versatile. They're allowed to pick up the ball. They're allowed to throw the ball, but they can't really move and hit very well. They can take 1 step and hit, but they're not real great hitters, and that's going to be reflected in their statistics. The other team here has 3 different types. They're going to have guards, which are these guys here up front. Pardon the fact that he's missing an arm, but he's the little bit bigger human-type guy in this suit of armor. You're going to have jacks, which are going to be these guys that are next to them here that have no arms but are kind of squatting. And you're going to have your strikers, which kind of have arms held out and they're ready to go. These are the guys that can kind of pick up and run with the ball and throw the ball and all types of stuff like that. So, one team only has 2 types of guys, the other team has 3, but they're all set up with their 6 guys on the field ready to go. So now that we're all set up, we need a ball, of course. You can't really play a ball game without a ball, and so we have that here. And this ball is always going to come in from the sidelines based on a roll. So essentially, once a score is made, you're going to roll this die, and it's going to determine how the ball comes in. It's going to come in 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces into the field here, and then essentially we're going to start our rush. If we had rolled a 6, the ball would have gone all the way to the edge and bounced off of one of these walls and kind of scattered based on a die roll, 1, 2, 3 one way, 4, 5, 6 the other way, and landed back on the field. It will never go back off. From this point on, the game is pretty much a continuous flow, with each player taking actions with their team before passing the rush to the next player. You'll see we have a track here on the board of 14 rushes, and basically that's how long the game is going to last. You'll go all the way to the end, and whichever team has the most points at the end of that will be the winner. But there are various ways rushes can end, and all kinds of stuff can happen in between. In addition, you'll see we have a score track here that goes from 0 up to 7 on one side and 7 on the other side. This is because only one team will ever have points. So as one team scores, their score will move more towards their side. If the other team scores, will move backwards. On a turn, each player gets 5 actions. They're going to have 5 of these chips to take actions with, and each time they use a chip, they may activate one of their players. These players can do many different types of things. For example, they can move, and each team is going to have statistics on their players as to how far they can move and what their other stats are. So if we look at the Tech 29ers, we can see they have guards, jacks, and strikers. Guards being the strength, jacks being jacks of all trade, kind of, and strikers being a little bit more focused on throwing and passing and picking up the ball. They all have a movement of 5, a strength of 4, a speed of 4, a skill of 4, an armor of 4, or 5 if they're the strikers, and a starting team of 2, 3, and 3, meaning that that's how many you get on your starting team. The orcs and goblins are going to be a little more specialized. You'll see they have movements of 5, but their stats different. The guard has a strength of 3+. That means a success for a guard is a roll of 3 or higher. whereas the jacks have a 5+, meaning it's harder for them to hit things, essentially. And their other stats are going to be different as well, based on whatever type of unit they are. So as I said, each player has 5 actions, and depending on which player goes first, of course, they'll take their actions first. So let's say that our red player here is going first, and they're going to use these tokens to denote taking actions. When they take an action, they can choose any one of their players to do that action, and you can activate the same player multiple times if you like. The different actions are running, sprinting, which is moving twice in a run. You can go ahead and you can try and pick up the ball by moving over it. You may try and throw the ball. You may also try and hit another player, or you can stand up if you've been knocked down, and various other things. But we'll say that this player decides to activate this guy right here, and he wants to go ahead and hit one of the other players. He's going to move first, and for moving, he's actually going to get a bonus. So running and hitting is better for him. He has a strength of 3, but when you're hitting, you get to roll a certain number of dice based on basic stats. Is you get to roll 3 dice to make successes, and for his strength of 3, everything on a 3+ is going to be more. However, because he's a guard, he gets an extra die, so he's going to get 4, and because he moved, he's going to get another extra die, which is 5. He's going to be rolling this against the other player, who only gets 3 dice. They don't get a bonus because they're not a guard. They also don't get a bonus because they didn't move. If this guy here had been threatening this square, meaning he was 1 closer for some reason, we would actually lose a die because we have another guy threatening us while we're making an attack. So having guys to assist your other guys is going to be a good idea because you'll roll less dice and have less chance to get successes. So we're going to roll for this guy, and anything above a 3 is going to be a success. So we have 1, 2, 3 successes here. If he had rolled a 6, it would actually explode and he would roll again. So if this was 3 successes, he'd roll again. He got another success, and he would roll that again. And so now he has 5 successes. Our other player is going to roll their dice, and they got 1, 2, 3 successes. They're going to re-roll that one because it's a 6. They did not get a 4th success because their strength is not a 3. It's higher than a 3, so they're going to have to roll better in order to do so. So we have 3 on 5. 5 is clearly higher than 3, which means that this player is successful in hitting this player and would knock him either back or down depending on how high the successes are compared. Since we didn't double our opponent's successes, we're simply going to push this guy back, and you can choose any one of the 3 hexes behind him to push him back. When you do so, you may follow, and this person automatically faces the area where they were pushed from, whereas you automatically face your opponent, and that's going to be kind of how that works. If you had doubled it, you would have knocked this guy down. At that point, he's going to have to roll an armor check based on his armor to see if he's going to be out of the round for the game, or even if he's killed. And if you roll less than you need to in order to be killed, then of course you're going to be off of the game forever. So essentially, you make an armor check based on what your armor is. You're rolling for successes equal to the number of hits in excess you took. So we had 5 versus 3. He'd need 2 successes to not be hurt. And he would roll his dice based on what he gets. So he'd look and he'd say, okay, I only got 2 successes. I'm actually okay and I'm not removed. But if he had gotten no successes, he would be removed for 2 rounds. And each round, he would move closer to being able to come back in, at which point he'd be placed in this box and have to come off from the side of the field back onto the court, with the maximum of 6 people being on the court at a time. You can also exit the court in the same areas, running off of the board and then running back on from this side, having new players to replace players that are either knocked out or just kind of too far out of the action to do anything. So that's one type of action. Another type could be simply to move, and you can move up to your movement, and if you want to, you can sprint to double your movement. When you move normally, you get your full movement. So let's say this guy's movement is 5. He moves 1, 2, 3, and he'd have to stop here because he's being threatened. But let's say he instead decided to run outside the outside and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is how normal movement works, and you can turn however you like. But if you decide to sprint, you run double movement, but each 60-degree turn you make takes you an extra movement. Picking up the ball is going to rely on different skills. You're going to try and pick the ball up based on, of course, your kind of skill, I guess. It's called skill. So you're going to move over the ball, and you're going to roll a skill roll. Each of your rolls, as I said, always starts with 3 dice, but certain guys get more dice based on what they are. And those are going to be your strikers. The strikers that are right here, or knocked out, from our opposing team. These guys, whenever they try and do something physical, such as move over the ball to pick it up, they're going to get an extra die. If they decide to do something throwing the ball, they'll get an extra die. Or if they're catching, they'll get an extra die. So they're a little bit more focused on that. So you can move, run over the ball, and try and pick it up. If at any time you drop the ball, you're going to end your rush, which means that, of course, the play would pass to the other person. This is so that you don't try and do it early, mess up, and then continue to try and pick up the ball. So you're going to want to save risky actions like that until the end of the round. So essentially, you're going to try and minimize your risk. You're going to try and hit whoever you can, then try and pick up the ball and run it downfield, with the ultimate goal, of course, being to try and score points. Now, how do you do that in this game? You'll see that there are these strike zones here. These are areas of hexagons that are put together, and there's one scoring hexagon here. On the other side, it's these lighter white ones. What you're trying to do is throw the ball into that area, and throwing the ball there requires you to, of course, make a successful throw. But you're only allowed to do so from inside these scoring areas, the lit up hexes here with the bullseyes on them. There's one that is a different color. If you throw from here, you actually score an extra point. So you can score inside any of these, throwing the ball to right here, and get 1 point. But if you do so from this line right here, you're going to get extra points for scoring from a little bit further away and making the hard throw. In addition, throwing at this strike zone is actually worth 3 points for a successful strike. When you get in here and you throw from any of these areas and you land it in here, it's worth 3 because this one's harder to get to. There's a bonus point from throwing for any of these, so it could be worth up to 4 or 2 points depending on which strike zone you manage to get to. So you're going to try and use your actions to best position your players to support your other players, of course to pick up the ball and perhaps throw it either to other players or, if you're in a strike zone, to score a strike in order to get points in order to win the game. And you can run, move, pick up the ball, throw the ball, try and hit somebody. Somebody who you're trying to hit can either try and strike back with rolling the same dice, or use their dice to dodge to get out of the way. And either way, you need to beat your opponent's die roll in order to successfully evade them or hit them back. And the player that gets hit will fall down or get pushed away. So whoever best manages to do this is going to score some points and, of course, move their track in either their direction or, if they're scored against, in the opposite direction in order to keep track of those points. When you do so, you're not going to reset the board. And this is very different from other sports games. You're not going to reset. Each player is going to be wherever they're standing. If these players are over here, and somebody's over here, and this player is actually in here to score, because our guards here can't score, the board status will stay like this, and the ball will come back in center field, which means that these players that are, maybe way down here for some reason may want to run off of the field, and you may want to bring a new player on over here in order to protect the ball, because maybe your opponent set up very well to strike back and score some more points. So it's a balance of where you want to keep your players, how you want to score points, whether you want to run them all the way down to score more points, or just get a quick score over here before the 14 rounds are passed. But regardless, when a player finishes their actions, it goes to the next one of these rushes, and each player will alternate rushes until the game ends either at 14, or if there's kind of a slaughter that happens, you can end the game early, of course. But basically, if player no longer has enough guys to take actions, or the game ends because of the rounds, whoever has the most points will be the winner. Well, there you have it. That is Dreadball Kickoff. A little bit simpler game than the old established Blood Bowl by Games Workshop, but of course a little bit more developed than something like Battle Ball, which was published quite some time ago by a larger distributor. I don't remember who. But anyhow, this game kind of takes the die rolling aspect of Blood Bowl with those special dice that you have to have the hits or the blocks or pushes and all of that, and distills it down a little bit to make it a little bit simpler. You have the D6, and you're using those for virtually everything. And rather than adding modifiers and comparing strengths versus your opponents, it's just basically based on what type of person you're using. If you're using a guard, they're going to get plus to hitting, and they'll get another one if they moved into an attack. If you're using a jack, they're really not going to get bonuses to anything, and if you're using a striker, it's more of the dexterity-based things that they'll get bonuses for. And simply, that's going to give you more dice, and then you're going to compare your overall successes to your opponent, which is a little bit easier than trying to figure out the calculations involved in Blood Bowl based on who's positioned next to who and supporting what, and so forth and so on. So I think they did a good thing there in simplifying it, but I kind of prefer the more number crunching and tactical movement of Blood Bowl. So there's that. I also don't really enjoy the scoring in this game, and I can't really explain why. I don't like the fact that I have to throw the ball into the end zone, or into the strike zone, I should call it, based on being in a specific area, and one specific hex is better than others, and I didn't cover it, but throwing further, of course, is harder, and that makes sense, but it's really just less dice. And if you have the right stats, you're going to do okay. But I don't like it. I can't explain it. I want to be able to just run the ball into the end zone and score, and it kind of takes away a little bit of that feel of football to me and kind of makes it more like football, soccer, rugby thing. that I'm not a big fan of. So overall, I do think the game has its place. I think it's a nice level between Battle Ball and Blood Bowl. If you don't like the complexity and the setup involved in Blood Bowl, and you don't want to maintain a league or anything like that, this is going to be a much easier variant for you that keeps a lot of the same feel but has its own rules adjustments to make it, its own thing. So if that sounds good to you, check it out. That's Dreadball Kickoff.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.